Hello, geometry students. We are going to do 3-2 today. And you'll see it's very similar to what you learned about in class previously in 3-1. So this is properties of parallel lines. So what we're talking about here is there will always be parallel lines for these postulates to be true. Okay, so you'll notice if two parallel lines, if two parallel lines, if two parallel lines, right? We're talking parallel lines here. So we already talked about same side interior angles, alternate interior angles, corresponding angles. You can use CA for and alternate exterior angles. So those are kind of the abbreviations that we'll use throughout the chapter for those. If you want to write them out, go right ahead and write them out. But those are the ones that I will accept. If you make up your own, that doesn't work, okay? Use these ones if you're going to abbreviate, then we know that we're both on the same page. So here's how this goes, okay? The first postulate here says if two parallel lines, so if you're looking at these two lines, they are parallel lines. That's a must. Are cut by a transversal. Your transversal is this one that cuts through the two lines. Then same side interior angles are supplementary. And if you recall, supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. The way I always tell people to remember this one is same side interiors are supplementary, right? The S's go together. So same side interiors will be supplementary. What that means in this picture is, for instance, your same side interior angles are on the same side of the transversal. So this being our transversal. Right now, 3 and 6 are on the same side, but they're also inside the parallel lines, right? So those are your same side interior angles. So we would say angle 3 plus angle 6 will equal 180 degrees every time, okay? So take a second, tell your neighbor, and I mean just a second, what the other set of same side interior angles would be. Did anyone actually do it? Hopefully you did. It would be angle 4 and angle 5. So angle 4 plus angle 5 will also equal 180 degrees. Okay, so that is what the same side interior angles postulate says. Hopefully that is clear to you. Okay, so then the second one is the alternate interior angles theorem. And this one says if two parallel lines, so again, these lines are parallel, are cut by a transversal, this one's your transversal, the one that cuts through the two parallel lines, then alternate interior angles are congruent. So not that they add up to 180 anymore, but that they are congruent. Tell your neighbor the two pairs of alternate interior angles that you see. Okay, now come back. Angle 3 is an alternate interior, so it is congruent to, right, because AIAs are congruent, angle 5. Okay, so 3 and 5 will always be congruent, and then the other one that hopefully you told your neighbor is that angle 4 is congruent to angle 6. Okay, this angle here will be congruent to that one. So alternate interiors are congruent. Same side interiors are supplementary. Okay. Then corresponding angles. So this one says, again, if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then corresponding angles are congruent. Isn't that convenient? So this one, there's a lot of corresponding angles. If you recall what we talked about in class in 3-1, you have these two vertices, right? The corresponding angles sit in corresponding locations from those vertices. So for instance, angle 2 from that vertex is the top left angle. That means angle 6, the top left angle here, is the corresponding angle. So that means that angle 2 is congruent to angle 6. They will have the same measure, okay? It also means angle 3, top right, is congruent to angle 7, top right. Okay, you should be seeing 2 more pairs. Angle 1 will be congruent to angle 5. And the last one, angle 4, is congruent to angle 8. Okay, so those are all corresponding angles, which you may call CA if you like CA. Remember, corresponding angles will be congruent. So if you notice so far, supplementary, congruent, congruent, okay? Last one, and this is probably the one that shows up the least on quizzes and tests and in the homework and whatnot, but we do see it from time to time. If 2 parallel lines, here's your parallel lines again, are cut by a transversal, alternate exterior angles will be congruent as well. So this is on opposite sides of the transversal. So here's your transversal, but outside of the parallel lines. So in this case, if I pick 2, okay, the opposite side of the transversal is going to be this bottom side somewhere, but this is parallel lines. So inside the parallel lines doesn't count, okay? This is outside the parallel lines, and the opposite side of the transversal, that's going to be angle 8. So in this case, angle 2 is congruent to angle 8, okay? And then the last pair, angle 1 is congruent to angle 7. Okay, so those are the 4 postulates and theorems that you're going to work with the most in this section. Just remember, same sides are supplementary. All the rest of them, all 3 of these are congruent. Okay, so these ones are supplementary. The other 3 will be congruent to each other. So if you go down here, it says, what are the measures of angle 3 and angle 4, and which theorem or postulate justifies each answer? So I'm actually going to go through more than just 3 and 4 with you here, because you can actually right now find every single one of these angle measures. And you'll see when there's 2 sets of parallel lines like this, there will only be 2 different angle measures in the whole problem. But let's just take it one at a time and see what those are. So if you look at this picture, this angle is given to us. This is 105 degrees. So if we're trying to find angle 3, this angle here is what type of angle with this 105? Tell your neighbor. What type of angles are the 105 and the angle 3? Okay, come back if you're being chatty. This is probably really funny if you're not saying a word right now. I'm sorry. But what these would be, those are alternate interior angles. And what we learned is if lines are parallel, which they are, okay, so here's our parallel lines. This is our transversal. Then alternate interiors are congruent, right? So that means the measure of angle 3 is 105 degrees. Those will be congruent. So this angle and this angle will be the same. Okay. Then take a look at angle 5. Now, some of you might be saying, oh, those are vertical angles, so they're congruent. So angle 3 and angle 5 are the same. And that is true. But I'm not going to look at it that way right now because you might not know angle 3 when they're asking you to find angle 5. So here's what I want you to see. Parallel lines, a transversal, okay, angle 5 is the top left angle, and this angle 105 is the top left angle. So those are actually corresponding angles. What do you know about corresponding angles? corresponding angles are congruent, right? So if this angle down here is 105, then the measure of angle 5 is going to be 105 degrees also because of corresponding angles. This was because of alternate interior angles at first, okay? Okay, so here's what I want you to see next. Look at angle 4. And I'm gonna, well, no, we'll leave it. Angle 4 is here. Okay, we know that this one is 105. So if we're looking at these as our parallel lines and line Q as our transversal, what kind of angles are those two? They are on the same side of the transversal. They're above the transversal, but they're inside your parallel lines, right? So those are same side interior angles. And we know those are supplementary. So if those have to be supplementary, then you go 180 minus the 105 will be 75 degrees, okay? So that's same side interiors, supplementary. So now here, I'm just gonna give you a quick rundown. You could say, so 4 is 75, right? You could say 4 and 6 are a linear pair, which are supplementary. This would be 105. You could say 7 and 105 are vertical, so this would be 105. We already said this was 105. We already said this was 105. You could call 5 and 2 same side interiors, so they're supplementary, which is going to make this 75. Or you could have said angle 2 and angle 4 are corresponding, making them both 75. 8 is a linear pair there, or same side interiors with 4. So 8 is going to be 105. And then 1 is vertical to angle 2. So that's going to be 75 also. So you can see every single angle in this whole problem is either 105 or 75. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of relationships with them. You have vertical angles, alternate interiors, same side interiors, correspondings. You have all the different types of angles that come into play. Okay, you can even see like this angle 5 and this angle 7. Those are alternate exterior angles, which are congruent, right? So there's a lot of different types of angles that come into play. Lots of options for how you're going to get to your answer, which is lovely. Okay, last one. And this one, you kind of have a couple options. Right now, you have parallel lines here. Okay, and then you have a couple transversals. You have a transversal that goes this way, and you have a transversal that cuts this way. Depending on how you look at this, you can solve for y a couple different ways. I'm just gonna draw these in a little better for you. Okay, so if this is our setup, one of your options is you could say right now that this angle, which is 40, is an alternate interior with which angle? Do you see it? Parallel lines, a transversal. Alternate interiors would be these two. Okay, and what do you know about alternate interiors when lines are parallel? You should know they are congruent, right? So that makes this a 40-degree angle. Now, do you see what I see? You have a triangle here. And what do you know about the three angles of a triangle? They add up to 180. So you are going to go y plus 80 plus 40 equals 180, which means take away that 120, and your y value should be 60 degrees. Okay, so that's one way that you could look at that problem. Let me show you another way that you could look at this problem. You could have said that this setup, so this whole angle and this whole angle are same side interiors. And same side interiors are supplementary. So 80 and y and 40 would have to add up to 180 because they're same side interiors. But look at your work here. Y plus 80 plus 40. Y plus 80 plus 40. It's the same work. It gets you to the same spot. Y is going to be 60 regardless, okay? So just keep that in mind. And that is same side interiors, alternate interiors, correspondings, and alternate exteriors. Let's just go back up to the top real quick. Keep in mind, same side interiors are supplementary. Everything else, alternate interiors, correspondings, alternate exteriors are congruent. If you can keep that straight, you're going to be in great shape, okay? You have the rest of the class period to work on your homework. Happy weekend.